The partial government shutdown is on track to become the longest in U.S. history this weekend, and it is threatening to cost federal workers another paycheck. Some 800,000 federal workers have been working without pay or furloughed since the shutdown began last month.
Now, President Trump is standing firm on his demand for $5.7 billion to pay for a wall. But now he's also suggesting $800 million for humanitarian needs at the border as a way to entice Democrats. The president is also talking about bypassing Congress by using money meant for the military. Major Garrett has more.
It is national security. It's a national emergency.
President Trump insisted he won't let Democrats build a political barrier to block construction of a border wall. A presidential emergency declaration might allow Mr. Trump to divert Pentagon funds to accelerate construction of the wall. But Democrats balked.
I think the president would be wide open to a court challenge saying, where's the emergency?
Despite stalled weekend meetings, the president called the process productive.
They don't like concrete, so we'll give them steel.
Mr. Trump's latest offer now calls the wall a steel barrier, but the White House has not budged from the price tag, $5.7 billion. It also wants more funds for Border Patrol agents, immigration judges, and detention beds. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi told CBS Sunday Morning the president isn't interested in negotiating.
He would like to not only close government, build a wall, but also abolish Congress. So the only voice that mattered was his own.
The president acted as if he could wear top Democrats down.
Schumer and Nancy Pelosi and myself can solve this in 20 minutes if they want to. If they don't want to, it's going to go on for a long time.
Our mortgage, our gas, electric.
A long time without pay for more than 800,000 federal workers like these prison guards in Massachusetts.
We're not getting paid, and the risk is the same.
The president was asked if he can relate to the pain of federal workers living paycheck to paycheck.
I can relate, and I'm sure that the people that are on the receiving end will make adjustment. They always do.
All right, Major Garrett, he's joining us from the White House now. Just listening to the president there, you know, one of the things that he said is that, look, you know, we could solve this whole thing in 20 minutes if the Democrats want to. I don't know. It doesn't seem like it because this is, you know, moving into the direction of becoming one of the longest partial government shutdowns so far in history. Is there any room for compromise at all at this point?
Well, there doesn't appear to be. And what the president says in the 20-minute timeline means if Democrats capitulate and give me everything I want. That's what the president means, because not only has the White House not budged, and the president over the weekend described his thinking about moving from a concrete wall to a steel barrier as a concession. Well, Democrats don't regard that as a concession at all. They still believe that a barrier or a wall in most, if not all cases, is unnecessary, wasteful, and as many of them have said, a 16th century solution to a 21st century problem. Not only that big disagreement over the barrier, the wall, whatever you want to call it, and how much to spend for it, the White House added to the list of demands this weekend more Border Patrol agents, more immigration judges, more detention beds, and wanted some other policy changes on immigration. All of this adding to its list of asks from Democrats, which they consider to be negotiating in bad faith. So what started on Saturday is, well, let's find out what the asks are on both sides and see if we can narrow them down. That's not what happened, and that's typically what happens at the beginning stage of a negotiation. Some things are must-haves for both sides, and you work away from those things that are sought, preferred, but not mandatory. What the White House did is it kept all the mandatories and added more. As far as the Democrats are concerned, that's not the way to negotiate. So this doesn't look as if it's on any sort of ramp toward a resolution. And what House Democrats announced over the weekend is they're going to start passing individual bills that deal with the other operations of the federal government, imperiled by this partial government shutdown, bills that were already passed by the United States Senate, written by Republicans with bipartisan votes behind them, and bring them to the House floor, send them to the Senate, and say, look, this is the way to get this agency open. Set aside the border and all those disputes for another time. But these parts of the government can be opened. There have been votes in the Senate run by Republicans all ready to do this. We in the Democratic House will just follow the lead of the Senate Republicans. to try to dislodge at least funding for those parts of the government that can be reopened that are not connected to this long-running and very intense political dispute about border security.
You know, Major, I want to ask you a question about something that the president said in the Rose Garden on Friday, because as you know, the president is very good at selling his message to his supporters. And obviously, because he's the president of the United States, whenever he speaks, the media, including here at CBS News, we share that with our viewers. But the president also, in those briefings or those press conferences that he gives, those statements that he makes to the media, sometimes doesn't tell the truth. And I'm curious about something that he said when in that Rose Garden press conference, he said that the other presidents of the United States also told him that he should build a wall. In other words, he said that some of them have told me, the president saying this, that we should have done it. There are 4 living ex-presidents. I just wanted to know what our reporting is on that. Have other presidents ever told President Trump, ex-presidents, that he should build a wall?
Not that I'm aware of, because that would be Bill Clinton, Jimmy Carter, George W. Bush, and Barack Obama. I can't imagine any one of those 4 telling the president you need to build a wall. Now, the president may have made a reference to, well, there were previous Democratic votes under President George W. Bush's presidency for something called the Secure Fence Act, which called for reinforced physical barriers on designated parts of the southern border. Many Democrats voted for that. George W. Bush signed that into law. That was an authorization. Congress never fully funded that underlying law. That might have been what the president was referring to, in the sense that under the George W. Bush presidency, this Secure Fence Act, this idea of a double reinforced fencing on certain parts of the southern border was not only necessary, Congress said it was necessary on a bipartisan basis, authorized the funds for that. He may have been making a reference to that. But as far as presidents living, calling him and saying, you've got to build a wall, and you're absolutely right, there's no evidence of it.
And just, Major, just a quick follow-up on that, on something that the president and others have said, including Sarah Huckabee Sanders, and she was called on that in an interview she gave to Fox News this weekend about the idea of terrorists that are coming through our southern border. That's a claim that has been made by the president and other members of his administration. What have you heard from other folks in the White House about that claim, since it's been disputed by the facts?
Well, not only disputed, but just debunked. It's not true. Special interest aliens are not terrorists. They are special interests because they are flagged because of a country of origin, certain parts of their travel patterns, or some other thing that makes them somewhat worthy of federal curiosity and or suspicion. They are not terrorists, and the State Department, as recently as last year, in its own words, this is the Trump administration State Department, said there is no evidence of a single terrorist entering the United States through the southern border. And when pressed on this, Sarah Sanders on Fox News Sunday said, well, they come in through lots of other means. Well, other means are not the border. And the president and many others have said you have to secure the border because, and they take that number, 4,000 a year, special interest aliens, divided by 365, and say 10 terrorists a day cross the southern border. That is a wild exaggeration and wild extrapolation that just doesn't stand up to the scrutiny of its own State Department. But the White House clings to these repeated assertions about the terroristic threat along the southern border, when there are plenty of Border Patrol agents who would tell you there are other legitimate and real threats along the southern border, some of them involving drug trafficking, some of them involving human trafficking, and some people cross the border clearly who are not just illegal in terms of not having proper documentation, but some have been deported because they committed actual felonies in the United States. All of that is true. Has been true, will probably still be true in the future, even if there is a physical barrier on some parts of the southern border. That comes with the territory. But this idea that terrorists on a daily basis, terrorists of the kind that we think about committing terroristic acts on the southern border, daily basis, not true.